Hey, what's up, guys? It is What If Typhlosion here, and this will be the first video that I make for this channel. It's going to be a what if Deku had a draconic gate quirk, and I'll explain the quirk in a little bit, but let's get on with the beginning part of the story. So we start out with Midoriya being born, and when he's born, they can already tell he has a powerful quirk because a small gate appears. It's small; they can see the sky through it, but then it disappears like 2 seconds afterwards. So, throughout his years, from when he was born to when he's 4 years old, he's been having these small gates appear around him randomly. He had no control over them. They would just appear for a few seconds and then disappear. So, when one day the gate gets big enough to where it's about Izuku's height, a small creature comes out, which surprises everyone at his preschool, as the teacher goes and calls his mother. They call Inko, tell her to come and come get her son because they think his quirk has manifested it. And the creature looks sort of like this, but about a feet, about 1 foot in length, and it has the exact same look as this. And as it comes out, it curls around Deku's shoulders and neck, and just lays there. As when kids get closer to him, the creature, which at this point you should figure it out, the dragon, growls at them, making them back away. So, but when Izuku goes to pet it, it goes into his touch. But when it sees the portal starts to close, it leaves off of Deku's neck and goes into the portal. And Inko soon gets there and picks up Midoriya and takes him to the Quirk doctor. Not the same one as in canon. A totally different one. They take Midoriya into another room to have his quirk tested and all of that. When they come back, the doctor is wide-eyed. And Inko thinks it's bad news. So she asks, what is it? Worried about her son's safety. But in actuality, the doctor is just so surprised of how powerful his quirk is, and how much more powerful it can get. So the doctor sits down in front of Inko and looks her dead in the eyes and says, his quirk is draconic gate. And she asks for an explanation on what it is and all of that. So, draconic gate is the power to manifest a gate to another world that has an infinite amount of dragons living there. So they can be as small as 5 inches long, or as huge as a skyscraper, or as tall as a skyscraper. And they come in all different sizes and forms. But once they come through the gate and have a spiritual bond with Izuku, they will listen to him no matter what, and they are extremely overprotective of Deku. Because if Deku dies, they die. If Deku gets hurt, they get hurt. But if they get hurt, Deku does not. And the dragons that come through have an extreme amount of intelligence to where if you give them multiple orders in a string, they will follow each and every order in sequence that you gave them. Or whichever one you prioritize. And Inko looks at the doctor wide-eyed and says, "No, that can't be true." The doctor says, The doctor says, "Yes, it is true." So Inko then looks down to Doctor, who has a beaming smile, and and when they go to leave the hospital, Inko is now scared of Midoriya because of what the doctor says of the dragons being very, very overprotective of him, to the point where some flipping how think that if she just left him in the forest, he'll be fine and she'll not have to worry about him ever again. But little did she know that the exact same doctor who did his Quirk examination has called UA and talked to Nezu about his Quirk, because she feared that if Deku fell into the wrong hands, he could essentially take over the world single-handedly, which he may or may not do. I am joking. He will not. So Inko then drives Midoriya out into the woods. Far into the woods. Essentially around where the Wild Pussycats live. But about 4 or 5 miles away. She then stops the car and looks at Izuku in the back seat and says, "Get out." He looks at his mother with a tilted head and asks her what she means. She then yells at Midoriya to get out of her car now. And she goes on to call him a demonic little being, scaring him even more. So he is now shaking in fear of his own mother. So much that he doesn't register what's happening next. And since he has not gotten out of the car yet, Inko gets out, opens the back door, grabs Izuku, and yanks him out of the car and into the woods. She then shuts the car door, gets back into the driver's seat, and drives off back to the city. Now, Izuku, being only 4 years old, is shaking in fear, and without even noticing, a draconic gate appears behind him this time. It's about twice his size, and this dragon comes out the size of the gate. And it sees Izuku on the ground, shaken, scared. So what it does is it waits for the gates to close. It then goes to Izuku, grabs him by his shirt, and puts him onto his back. And as the dragon is doing this, Izuku wakes up from his shock and sees that he's now on the back of a dragon twice his size, but realizes that the dragon is there to help him. So what the dragon now does is go deeper into the woods to find a cave to make as their new home. The dragon then finds a cave about a mile away from where he was, goes into it, and there's a bear. The dragon looks at the bear, and it starts growling at it. The bear looks up at the dragon and growls back. But then the dragon lunges at it, biting its head off, killing the bear in an instant. And then it turns to Izuku and says, "Child, can you go get some wood?" In a more deep voice. As this dragon is not too old, but old enough to where it knows how to survive on its own, and to take care of one person with it. Now, this dragon is a water / cave dwelling dragon. So he can move in the water efficiently, but also have the vision required to either hunt at night or in a cave. And yes, he can breathe fire, but he also has a small control over sapphires. He has a small control over sapphires, to where he can have them grow out of the ground and then control them in the air once they come out of the ground. So he can control sapphires to circle him if need be. So Izuku does as the dragon told him to do, walks out of the cave, grabs a bit of wood, and then comes back. The dragon has already dismembered the bear and has Izuku set the wood into piles. He lights one pile up and have Izuku, and teaches Izuku how to cook it, while helping him while doing most of the work himself. As time goes on, Izuku trains, works out, so he is not the weak, scared Izuku we know in canon. And the Wild Wild Pussycats, as the years goes on, they start hearing rumors about a beast roaming the woods with a child on its back, hunting, gathering, and frightening people away from a specific area. So they decide to go and check this out to see if it's a villain organization. So when the Wild Wild Pussycats get to the area, they survey it and find tracks in the ground. Now, this is about 3 years, so Izuku is now 7. They find tracks that they do not recognize. I believe it's Pixie Bob? Yeah, Pixie Bob says, I do not know these tracks. They're not of an animal that should be in this forest. So the rest look at each other, nod, and then splits off into pairs. And then one follows the tracks. One follows one set of tracks, while the other follows another. And they both converge on the cave. They look at each other, nodding, knowing that whatever made the tracks and whatever is scaring the people are in that cave. So they walk in, and when they get in there, they see the dragon curled up, laying down asleep. But they also see a tuft of green hair in the middle of it. Pixie Bob moves in to get a closer look, just in case the dragon woke up, or for them it's this creature. Just in case this creature wakes up, he can fend it off for a little bit, just enough for them to retreat. So when he gets closer, he sees Izuku with only a pair of shorts and no shoes and no shirt. He then walks back to the rest of them and then says, "It's a kid in there." From what he looks like, he's either 7 or 8. The other 3 go wide-eyed. A 7 or 8-year-old child in these woods alone with a creature. So they all nod and move further away from them. And they decide to wait for either one of them, the creature or the kid, to wake up. And they take shifts just in case. Now, from the dragon's perspective, let's call him let's say Sapphire. Let's just call him Sapphire. So Sapphire is the first to wake up because he felt something's not right. So he wakes up and looks around him. And when he looks towards the entrance of the cave, he sees 4 figures. 3 of them are sitting down chatting with each other. One of them is looking dead at him. And Sapphire then starts to growl, getting up from his position and growls at them even more. Since Sapphire had stood up, Izuku woke up because of the movement. He looks at Sapphire and says, "Sapphire, what's going on?" Trying to make sense of what's happening. And then when he looks where Sapphire's looking, he sees the wild Pussycats. And he jumps up to his feet and gets into a fighting stance because he cannot see them clearly. And then he yells, "Who are y'all? What are you doing in my cave?" Because he considers the cave his home. Pixie Bob is looking back at them and says, "I'm Pixie Bob. one of the wild Pussycats. And this sparks a recognition in Izuku's head, since he was a hardcore hero fan. And he says, wait, aren't there supposed to be 4 of y'all? And the other 3 stand up and introduces themselves as well. Sapphire, while all this is happening, is looking between Izuku and the Wild Pussycats. And then he speaks, shocking the Wild Pussycats. Izuku, who are these people? Izuku then explains who they are and what they do as a profession. Sapphire nods and calms down a little, but he's still on guard. Pixie Bob then walks up to them and asks Izuku what exactly is he doing here. Izuku tells Pixie Bob what has happened, and that his mother threw him out in the woods just because she was afraid of his quirk. And this is when Mandalay, I believe, gets a phone call. She walks out and answers the call. It's from Nezu. Nezu is asking Mandalay if they can host their annual, host a training camp out at their place. Mandalay says, sure, but we have a bit of a situation at the moment. Nezu asks, what exactly is it? She then explains to Nezu what is happening. All the while, Pixie Bob is trying to convince Deku to come back with him to their home. Sapphire then agrees with Pixie Bob, saying that it should be better than living alone, like they have been. So, Izuku then agrees and hops onto Sapphire's back. And they start to exit the cave, as Mandalay soon finishes telling Nezu what has happened. Nezu then says, I am coming there now, which shocks Mandalay. And she asks him, why are you coming here? Nezu then says, about 3 years ago, we got a call from a doctor who did a quirk examination on a kid who had a quirk called draconic gate. And from what you have told me, I suspect it's the same kid. She then says okay, and that it will be waiting for him there. So Mandalay, Pixie Bob, and the other two Wild Pussycats, along with Deku and Sapphire, they go to the where the Wild Pussycats stay in the woods. Pixie Bob then takes Deku in for a well-deserved third bath, and gets him a change of clothes that they just so happen to have laying around. While Mandalay is waiting out front with Sapphire, trying to get a better understanding of Sapphire and the world he comes from. When then all of a sudden a car pulls up, and out comes Nezu and Shoda Aizawa. Shoda and Nezu walk up to Mandalay and greet her, as Shoda looks at the dragon in suspicion, while Sapphire looks back at them with the exact same suspicion and with his guard up. Nezu then asks Mandalay if he can see the Izuku. She nods and says he's inside with Pixie Bob. Aizawa then turns to Sapphire and asks him, "So what exactly are you?" Not expecting an actual answer from Sapphire, he says, "I am a dragon from a different world." And both Nezu and Shoda back up a little, because they were not expecting for the dragon to actually be able to speak. So, when Shoda regains his confidence, he asks him, "Okay, how did you get here?" Sapphire then says, "By a gate created by the Little One." He calls Izuku Little One as a tease to his age, because Izuku is now about half the size not half the size, 3/4 the size of Sapphire now. So, Nezu then goes inside and sees Izuku just standing there looking at Nezu in a bit of shock. Nezu then says, "Ah, there you are. May we have a chat?" Izuku nods his head, and Izuku and Nezu sit down at a table, as Nezu then starts to ask Izuku questions, like how old he is, how long he's been living in the woods, how long has his quirk been active, and so on and so forth. Just general questions. And then he says, "Would you like us to find your mother to reunite y'all?" Now, Izuku shakes his head hard. No. And this catches Nezu a bit off, and he asks, "Why?" Deku then says, "Because she left me. She was afraid of me. I do not think she would want me either way." Nezu then nods, understanding, as Aizawa then walks in and says, "Then how would you like to live with me?" Catching both Deku and Nezu off guard, as Nezu then asks Shoda what exactly he means. Shoda then says, "I'll adopt him." And this brings Deku into tears, as he then says, "Okay." Now, let's fast forward a few years, as Shoda and Mike are in the living room, as Izuku is in the backyard of their new home, since the last one got too small to fit both Izuku and Sapphire. So Izuku's out back with Sapphire as they're chatting, having fun, as Sapphire has made sure Izuku keeps up with his training regimen. And Aizawa is happy about this, because then he doesn't have to do it himself. As Mike looks at Shoda and says, "Alright, what has you in a good mood?" Shoda then says, "Well, I'm just happy that our son has someone as a trainer." And this gets a chuckle out of Mike, and he says he also has a babysitter with that dragon around. And this gets a smirk out of Aizawa, as he says, "Yes, I know, and that's why I'm enjoying this." Deku has mastered his quirk. Well, not really mastered it, but has gotten a good handling on it to where he can send Sapphire back to his world. But since they've lived together for a long while, they have a spiritual connection now. And he can call Sapphire back any time he pleases. But he lets Sapphire stay with them because he does not wish to see his one and only caretaker that he has loved go away. And he can also summon Sapphire from where he is currently to wherever Deku is. So a portal will open up where Sapphire is and where next to Deku is. And he can go through it and appear with Deku. Yeah. That'll come in handy real quick. So Aizawa then says to Aizawa then walks out of the house to the backyard and says this. "Hey Izuku, how would you like to come to UA with me for a day?" Izuku perks up and says, "Seriously?" Aizawa nods as Izuku shakes his head yes. Yes, Dad. So Izuku then is very energetic when Aizawa said this. And later on in the day, it's now dinner time, as Mike calls Deku in for dinner. Deku is now about, he was 7 when he got adopted by Shoda and Mike, so let's say he is now 10. He is 10 at this point in time when he's heading to UA for the first time. So they go and getting off track. So Izuku comes inside and eats dinner with Aizawa and Mike after he sent Sapphire back to his world so he could hunt and eat. So then, um, Mike then tells Deku to go clean up and get ready for bed since he has to get up early in the morning to be able to go to UA with Aizawa. Deku nods and runs upstairs to get ready for bed. Mike laughs at this. Mike chuckles at this a little bit and then smiles at Aizawa and says, "He is the best thing that has come into our lives." Aizawa nods as he can't help but smile a little bit as well. So the next day, Izuku goes with Aizawa to the UA and looks around in amazement. He then goes through the day following Aizawa around and sees how he teaches. And when Izuku sees Aizawa just gets into his sleeping bag and goes to sleep, he face palms in front of Aizawa's class and asks them if he does this every day. They nod as Izuku then smirks, walks to Aizawa, and sits down on his chest. And just stays there while he summons the 1-foot dragon from when his quirk manifested and plays with it. The students go throughout the day, so does Izuku and Aizawa. Izuku gets to know some of the teachers and faculty early on, as every year he goes to UA with 2 times a year. Once with Aizawa, once with Mike. As he sees the way they teach. And Izuku doesn't go to the same school as Bakugo in this, as Aizawa has him homeschooled. As then, let's skip a few years to where he is 16 and is about to go take the entrance exam to UA. He's walking to the front door so he can wait for the auditorium. Go wait into the auditorium where he trips and falls. But he doesn't, not really. As a girl then says, "Release," and has Izuku on his feet now, as she apologizes for using her quirk on him without permission. This is, of course, Ochako Uraraka. Now, I'm not going to give this a definite ship just yet, but it will be between these 3 candidates: Momo Yaoyorozu, Jiro, or Uraraka. And y'all can choose in the comments which one, or I might just pick one for myself. Or I might make a community tab and have y'all decide there. But we'll see. But he then goes and he's not sitting next to Bakugo. He's sitting somewhere else.
As Ida then stands up and asks Mike about the zero-pointer and his whole charade about them being irresponsible and such. But he then points towards Deku, who had summoned the 1-foot dragon and is now playing with it, and says, "What are you doing? How dare you not take this seriously and start playing with that pet?" As Deku just looks up at Ida and points at himself, when Ida then says, "Yes, you." Deku then says, "It's probably because I am paying attention. I'm just petting my pet dragon." And when he says the word dragon, everyone who could hear him looks at him in disbelief, not believing it. As Ida then rolls his eyes and sits down. As Mike then continues to explain the test. Izuku, being tutored by Aizawa and Nezu, as well as Mike, and yes, Izuku does get taught by Nezu, since he was homeschooled. Now, Izuku gets around the top 10 on the written. Now, here comes the practical, where Izuku then looks at Uraraka. Yes, I could have given him the recommendation, but nah, I might make this interesting. He then sees Uraraka extremely nervous as he then goes to walk towards her to try and calm her nerves. When then, of course, just like in canon, Ida decides to walk in and then accuses him of trying to mess with other candidates and make them not focus on what they have to do. As Izuku just rolls his eyes and walks by him. And goes to Uraraka and tries to comfort her and ease her nerves as best as he can at this point. Few seconds later, the gates open and Mike then screams out, "Well, what are you waiting for? Go!" Izuku has already made the portal and has Sapphire come out of it, shocking the students next to him. He then hops onto Sapphire as Sapphire flies up into the air and basically dive bomb a few 3-pointers and 2-pointers. He is completely ignoring the 1-pointers. As time goes by, as Izuku now has about 400 villain points and 200 hero points, or rescue points. As he's still on Sapphire's back, as they both see the 0-pointer appear. And they are about to fly to a different area to continue gaining points, but then hear a scream. When they look back, they see Uraraka under the rubble. As Izuku then has Sapphire fly up towards the Zero Pointer's head and gets off on his shoulder. Izuku then tells Sapphire to go help Uraraka out of the rubble. As Sapphire flies down to help Uraraka, Izuku goes into the head and starts dismantling it as fast as he can, ripping wires, tearing stuff apart, breaking what he can. He's even summoned his 1-foot dragon buddy to help him do so. As when he comes out running, as the head soon explodes as he jumps off the Zero Pointer. Sapphire has already gotten Uraraka out of the rubble, as he then sees Deku falling. As he then shakes his head, flies up to Deku and grabs his shoulder with his front claws, and then flies down and puts Deku's down. As he then says, "Deku, you complete idiot." No, Izuku, you complete idiot. Izuku is just chuckling at this as he says, "Hey, I get to stop, didn't I?" As Sapphire then shakes his head in disappointment. As a week goes by, as Izuku then gets his acceptance letter from UA. He knew he was getting accepted thanks to Aizawa telling him so after the exam finished. So we then get to the start of UA. Izuku is walking to 1A's classroom as he just looks at the door and thinks to himself, "Who in the heck is that tall?" As he has his 1-foot dragon draped across his shoulder. He then walks in and sees Bakugo sitting on the desk with Ida berating him for sitting on the desk. Izuku goes wide-eyed for a minute as he then says, "Kachan?" And when Bakugo hears the word Kachan, his head perks up, turns around and looks at Izuku as he then says, "What the hell, Deku?" Jumps off the desk and runs towards him, leaving most of the class shocked. Izuku, bracing for impact, has a Bakugo run into him and punch him on the shoulder and says, "Where the hell have you been?" Izuku chuckles and says he'll explain it after class, or somewhere else if he wants to hear it right now. Bakugo, not having as big of an ego with his quirk in this what if, says he can wait until after class, as Izuku then feels that something's off. He then sidesteps, and Uraraka is already in the air and lands on Bakugo. As she then moves back and says, sorry, to Bakugo, as she then turns and looks at Deku and says, "Thank you for helping me during the entrance exam." He says it's no problem, as Aizawa then appears and says, "Get to your seats, you brats." Izuku looks at Aizawa and says, "You have no right to say that to your son." making everyone in the class look at Deku and Aizawa. Okay. Yeah. So, where were we? Ah, yes. Everyone's looking between Deku and Aizawa as Bakugo then says, "Who the hell are you calling father? That ain't your dad." Izuku then looks at Bakugo and says, "He is now," giving him a subtle hint. Bakugo takes the hint and nods as they all then goes to their seat as Aizawa introduces himself. And then says, "Go put on your gym outfits and go to the training field." Rocker then asks about orientation as Aizawa then says, "I can teach this class however I want. There is no rules differing, so go do it now." So they all go to the changing rooms as Mineta finds the hole in the wall. Getting cocky, he looks through it and has a earphone jack pierce his eyes. Well, not really pierce his eyes, but poke it. As he then jumps back in a bit of pain. Izuku shakes his head and then takes off his shirt looking a bit like this. No, like this. I'll get to the reason why I have this photo in the second part. Well, he looks a bit like this. As Jiro looks through the hole to see who is peeping on them, and she sees Izuku buff. Or, well, she sees Izuku like this, and gets a nosebleed. The other girls are looking at her and are wondering why she is having a nosebleed. She then says Izuku is buff. Not believing her, Momo looks through the hole and just barely catches a glimpse of Deku shirtless, as she also gets a nosebleed. So, they then go out to the training field as Izuku had gotten the most points on the practical exam. Aizawa chucks him the ball and says, "You know what to do, Izuku." He nods and then chunks the ball as far as he can. But then a portal appears right in front of it as the 1-foot dragon then grabs the ball and flies even higher and higher and higher to as high as he can as another portal appears, and Sapphire comes out this time, grabbing the ball from the 1-foot dragon and flies it as high as he can, and then just chunks it. So it goes pretty far. Izuku is just looking at Aizawa smugly as he's like, "Ha." Aizawa just shakes his head and reads off how far it went. Izuku gets a lot better scores than in canon, as Aizawa had did say that the last person will be expelled as the quote-unquote logical ruse. As at the end, he says that, and they go throughout the first day of UA like normal. And this is where I'll be cutting it for now. Hope y'all enjoyed it, and how long is this actually? Nope, it doesn't tell me. Well, hope you enjoyed and have fun, my guys.